I want him to see me as rude as this will go.
Go to your room!
Since the first trailer came out, I had this stuck on my mind about House of the Dragon. How can they make another Game of Thrones without it being exactly like Game of Thrones? And right in the first episode, the answer came in the form of a civil war for the Iron Throne within the house with the craziest motherfuckers in all Westeros. Crazy motherfuckers with dragons. And even though the first episode didn't do much, it still managed to introduce some of the main players for this iteration of the Game of Thrones and tease the story well enough to keep me around for the journey. But then the second episode came out, and by the end of that second hour, I'm still not sure what that journey is or who are we riding along with. And that, my fellow watchers, can be as big a disaster as running in a straight line to escape an arrow, or kind of forgetting about the Iron Fleet, or seeking shelter in a crypt while hiding from a zombie army. And that is especially true if you're writing, or Jon Snow not being the one to kill the Night King. Seriously, why? Why Arya? Why? Anyway, that is especially true if you're writing fantasy. You see, in almost any piece of narrative fiction, we, the audience, need someone to take us through the story. That someone is usually our main character. Someone relatable to us in some way, whom we are supposed to follow around and care about their journey. Sure, there are variations to this, but there are exceptions to the rule. In most cases, don't stray too far away from this paradigm. And the reason why this is even more important when you are telling a fantasy or a science fiction story is that, by definition, a big part of your world will be completely alien to your audience. So we need someone to help us explore this universe and help us get invested in it. And how do you do that? Well, let's take a look at Game of Thrones' own Ned Stark for a minute. On the first episode of Game of Thrones, we first meet Ned Stark at around 10 minutes into the episode overseeing Bronn's archery training when he's told that the deserter from the Night's Watch has been captured. Ned Stark himself then executes the poor man and explains to Bronn why the man had to die and why he was the one to kill him. On their way home, they find 5 orphan direwolf puppies. He then orders the men to give them quick deaths as they won't last long without their mother. Bronn then makes a plea for the puppies' lives, but Ned is firm on his decision. Jon then notes there are 5 pups for 5 Stark children. Ned finally gives way to Bronn's wishes, and we cut to King's Landing just past the 18-minute mark. In just roughly 8 minutes, and before the 20-minute mark in the entire series, Game of Thrones tells us who we are supposed to root for, why are we supposed to care about him, and everything else we need to know about the main character of the season, the main character of the entire show at that point as far as the audience is concerned. Ned Stark, even though the ruler of Winterfell, is a family man who takes time to oversee his sons tutoring his youngest in training, with his wife by his side. When Roderick Cassel announces the capture of the deserter, the realization that he now has to take a desperate man's life pains Ned. But he's a man who upholds tradition and order, even if that means doing stuff sometimes that go against his own feelings and beliefs. Ned then professes his allegiance to the king before beheading the poor fellow. Sean Bean's acting tells us how every bit of this ritual aches Ned. He then goes to Bronn and tells the kid,
"The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
Your actions have consequences and you must understand the weight of the choices you make." The scene with the wolf shows us that Ned is a strict man, but he is also human and gives way to his children's wishes while still showing that he does it because he trusts his children are capable of taking care of the wolves. You know, with the exception of fucking Rickon, who can't even run right. I mean, Jesus kid, just run in a different direction, it's not that hard. These 8 minutes establish every single core value of this character. They show us Ned's traits which we, who don't live in this fantasy medieval world, can quickly relate to and establish everything that will be the rise and fall of Lord Eddard Stark. Ned then goes on to immerse himself into the cutthroat politics of King's Landing that would ultimately lead to his demise. As Ned witnesses the filth in King's Landing and is disgusted at just how evil these people can be and what they will do for power, so do we. And then you're having Ned Stark, in a single character, someone you can relate to and someone to introduce and help us navigate this brand new fantasy world. Ned Stark is a prime example of masterful character design and development in a TV series, and he's the perfect example of an audience surrogate. Now let's take a look at House of the Dragon. We are already 2 hours into the story, 2 entire episodes, and I will now ask you a question I'm honestly not sure I have the answer for. Who is the main character in this? Well, I guess, it is supposed to be Rhaenyra. She is, after all, front and center in all promotional material for the series, and is by far the character we spend most time with in these first 2 hours. Now, if this is our main character, what do we know about her? Well, we know she doesn't want to do what women usually do in this world. She doesn't want to be a wife or a mother. She wants to be a warrior and ride her dragon into battle. Okay, great premise, but what is she like? What is she like as a person? What is her character like? Well, I guess she's rebellious. Sure, nice. And what else? Well, that's pretty much it. In every single scene Rhaenyra is in, she's either stating that she wants to defy tradition in some way, discussing how badly and unjustly women are treated in this world, meddling on crown business, or walking around moping because she doesn't get to succeed her father on the Iron Throne. That is it. So it's basically a lot of complaining and crying. But why? We are never told or shown why she like this or why she wants any of this. But watch her. We're never shown why Ned is the man he is either. Sure, we're not. But Ned Stark was given human traits that are easily relatable to most people in the real world. The girl is 15 years old. But watch her. Daenerys was also a teenager in the beginning of Game of Thrones, and we didn't know anything about her either.
Oh, would you just please?
Yes, she was. And no, we didn't. And that is why we spent an entire season following her through all the shit she had to endure and that made her the character she would eventually become. The reason why it works for Daenerys is because she's not the main character in the first season. We had Ned for that. And even then, she's already a fine audience surrogate for everything that happens in Essos. Anyway, Rhaenyra is 15 years old. By the rules of this world, because she's a rich woman in a royal family, she would have been mostly shielded from any kind of harm and suffering. So what could she possibly have been through or seen that already at that age had her so hellbent on doing everything she's not supposed to? We are never told. And that leads me to believe that we're supposed to take this character for what she is, a bratty teenager. We are never given any legitimate reason for us to relate to her as a person. She just walks around with a smug look on her face, interrupting everyone and thinking she's smarter and more enlightened than every adult on the show. It is either that or crying because she doesn't get what she wants when she wants it. The only thing we are given to relate to her is her mourning of her mother. But then later, when Alicent is talking about how she prays for her mother in the Septon and then teaches Rhaenyra how to do so, Rhaenyra almost immediately breaks down crying and whines about how she doesn't want her father to see her as just a little girl.
I want him to see me as more than this little girl.
Do you ever feel like breaking down?
So her relatability is confined to either dead mothers or the memory we may have of one day have been an insufferable emo teenage asshole, which is fine for a bratty arrogant teenage character, which is what she is, but this is not fit for a main character. Who the fuck relates to any of this? Who is supposed to root for this girl? Other teenage girls? Because I'm pretty sure they're not the target audience of this. Ned's traits are universal. His values and principles can be relatable to any human being alive under the sun. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, a boy or a girl. He is a righteous person who adores his family and does his best to live up to what is expected of him and fulfill his duties. And what about Rhaenyra? She's rebellious? That's it? This is your main character? This? An annoying teenager who wants things her way just because and that already knows how to do stuff better than the adults around her for absolutely no reason at all? I mean, come on, Daemon just giving her the egg bag was fucking ridiculous. All this bearded man couldn't solve the situation, but this little girl appears out of nowhere and deals with it like it is nothing? What the fuck? Also, we, the audience, don't have a proper surrogate, which would be mostly fine since we already have 8 seasons in this world. Except that it is not the same world. It is 172 years in the past. The politics in the players are completely different and I can't understand shit of what the council is yapping about every other scene. There's just no way to keep up with all the different names and places these assholes throw at the audience like we have any idea of what any of it means. It doesn't matter if this will be explained later. No one will remember any of this shit by the time any of it becomes relevant because we don't even know what to pay attention to. You know what could really help us here? A fucking audience surrogate. There are still 9 episodes in this season alone, and they could always turn this around. Maybe this is what the Rhaenyra character is supposed to be. Maybe this is what they intended her to be. I know there's a time jump, and maybe after the time jump she will be different from this. Maybe that's her character arc. But when we have reached the 3rd episode and we still don't care about any of the characters, and the one you're supposed to be rooting for actually annoys you, House of the Dragon has already botched the really important point to any story. Arguably the most important. Establishing a relatable main character. Because of the ramifications of what we learned on those 8 minutes in episode 1 of Game of Thrones, Ned Stark's death is one of the most soul-crushing and memorable moments in television. And that is done perfectly because we rooted for him since the very beginning. We wanted him to have his happy ending. As for Rhaenyra, we still have a long way to go. She may end up being a better character than Ned Stark himself. Who knows? But right now, 2 hours into our story, these people still haven't managed to do what Game of Thrones did in 8 minutes.